Good morning, everyone. My name is Kay Riley. I am on the library committee, which is part of the Board of Spiritual Growth. And the members on the committee are Lorna Truck, who's a retired librarian from the Des Moines Public Library, Aaron Riker, Kate Scanlon, Joy Wilhelm, and me. This week is the beginning of Banned Books Week, and as your library committee, we thought it was important that we talk about it. So before I introduce our speaker, I want to tell you about the Plymouth Library, in case you don't know that we have one. Maybe you're new, maybe you've been here a long time and you just haven't found it because it is kind of hidden away. But you go out this door and down this hall, and it surprised me this morning, but the burning bush stained glass window isn't there. I think it's being cleaned or fixed. Okay. So behind that stained glass window is the entrance to the library. So go in there, and on the wall, one of the walls, this wall, you'll see our banned book display. And then if you go on in, you will see a sign, well, two signs. You will see the Inspiration Lounge and the library, and they are the same thing. So it's a lounge and it's a library. How could it get better? So go in. You will not see the books immediately because they are all on the south wall. But we have a whole wall of books and several special sections of anti-racism and LGBTQ and climate, among other things. So with that, I want to Yes.
Is it open today?
It is always open. If the church is open, it's always open.
Do you issue library cards?
We don't have library cards. It's a, what do you call it? A honor system. You walk in, you find your book, you take the card out, put your name on it, and put it in the little box there. And when you bring it back, put the card back in the book and put it in the basket underneath, and we will reshelve it. Okay. So Sam Helmick is with us today, and she is the president of the Iowa Library Association. She works as a Community and Access Services Coordinator at the Iowa City Public Library, and she has served on multiple committees for the American Library Association. As Intellectual Freedom Chair for the Iowa Library Association, Chair of the Iowa Governor's Commission of Libraries, and a member of the third cohort of Library Freedom Project. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you for having me. Are you able to hear me all right? Wonderful. Thank you to having me here and those in hybrid. It's so wonderful to be in community with you all today, and I appreciate that you're giving time to this subject because it's very close to my heart, and I know that there's a lot of things to focus on right now. And so thank you, Kay, for the wonderful introduction, and the fact that I get to do some library tourism before I leave today is making me very excited because I try to visit libraries wherever I go, and now I don't even have to leave the building. This is fantastic. So I am Sam Helmick, and I am currently your ILA president. I sit on the executive board for the American Library Association, and Community and Access Services Coordinator is quite a mouthful. What that really means is that I resource three excellent teams that provide both public relations and marketing services, circulation services, and then bookmobile and outreach services, and they sometimes let me drive the bookmobile. So life is good. My experience with intellectual freedom began a couple years ago when I was what we would call a chapter counselor. So essentially, every state in the union is considered a chapter underneath the American Library Association, and then we have emissaries that go and vote on matters of standards and ethics and core values, and I was the Iowa representative. And at the same time, they said, Sammy, we're going to make you the Intellectual Freedom Chair because you'll be connected with the national office, but don't worry, not much happens. I was at ALA midwinter, technically signing in, and I get a call from my then president, who will remain nameless, Mike, and he says, Orange City Public Library is having their books burnt live on Facebook Live right now. A minister from a town over has taken some LGBTQIA plus materials from their collection, because open access is a thing and you can borrow from multiple libraries around the state, which is usually great. But he decided to burn them live on Facebook. And that was my deep dive into intellectual freedom, because at that point I didn't know too much about it. So my first mission was to send the library board a Hy-Vee gift card that said, I'm coming, we're gonna learn together, but here's some carbs for donuts until I get there. Because sometimes that's all you can do. And then it's just joyful to share my cat through Zoom, even when she's not here. This is Rilke. So what's our roadmap today? Well, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Iowa libraries. I'm not really fun at parties because I typically just talk about Iowa libraries. I'm quite in love with them. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to have a dedicated audience to do it again. And then I think it's important to talk about where we are at, right? Because libraries are reflections of the communities they serve, whether it's a school library or a church library or a public library. And so we're all in this together, and it's probably important to kind of lay our head to the ground and kind of feel like what's happening here? Where are the rumblings throughout the state? And then I'm hoping we'll get weird, because it's sort of fun. And I think the messiness, the authenticity, and just the raw humanity of this process is really why we're so far along in intellectual freedom to begin with. So intellectual freedom, I'm gonna be a monster. I'm gonna call anybody out. Does anybody want to give me a definition of intellectual freedom? Yes.
It's the freedom to learn.
Do you do air fives, high fives?
To grow.
Yes, the freedom to learn and the freedom to grow. And that requires things like privacy, where I'm not checking out everything you're going to be taking from the Plymouth Library this morning, right? And it requires access, so it's open when we're here, which is very handy. But it also requires that it reflects your values and that you all have a voice in what is taking place there. Thank you for being brave and answering the question for me. I've been at this for 15 years and I didn't know what intellectual freedom meant, so you kind of saved me there. All right, so who are we? We are the founders of the Bill of Rights. I just met Lorna at the Des Moines Public Library. You could probably say this a little bit better than me, but the Library Bill of Rights was founded here. In 1938, Des Moines Public Library Director Forrest Spalding had to reconcile with himself. He had to do the work. He had to think about social justice and access and equity. And he had realized that the policies of the Des Moines Public Library were not fair to German immigrants. And their refusal to offer Mein Kampf on the shelves was an intellectual freedom violation. And he was quoted as saying, maybe we would have known what we were getting into with World War II if we had had more robust access before. So he wrote the Library Bill of Rights. And now that I'm on the national board, I love to rub this in at ALA at their headquarters in Chicago. He wrote it in 1938, and in 1939 it was adopted nationally by the American Library Association. So they call it their Bill of Rights, but folks, that's our torch to carry. And so I am a chapter counselor, I was at one time, and that means 50 states, but it also means 7 other territories. The American Library Association has 57 chapters, which means the standard that we wrote here is an international standard for freedom. That is an incredible legacy to continue on in the future. And I never say it without getting goosebumps, because it's important work that we all do together. We also have more public libraries per capita than any other state in the union, which means some of them are the size of my kitchen, and they're being run by directors who are volunteering their time to make sure that free people read freely and you have access to opportunity. That's pretty amazing too. But then also there are over 200,000 students that rely on this at the academic level before we even get into the school level, right? K through 12. So how many of you were surprised today to learn that you had a library in your church? Okay, I was. And I was delighted to realize that we have to have incubators of information and opportunity, right? Because what you're doing today is really good work, but the good work doesn't stop on Sunday. You keep doing it every hour until you get back here again in a week. And so whether they're in a church or they're in a school or they're in the public space, they're incubators of opportunity. So let's just go over the Library Bill of Rights. Did you know that that's what you were signing up for this morning when you popped in? The first one is books and other library resources. So that could mean meeting rooms, that could mean speakers, that could mean knowledge experts that look like me and worship like me and love like me, right? Resources is a very broad term. So books and other library resources should be provided for the interest, information, and enlightenment of all people of the community the library serves. Materials should not be excluded because of the origin, backgrounds, or views of those contributing to their creation. It's a pretty good start. Forrest is doing fine so far. 2, libraries should provide materials and information presenting all points of view on current and historical issues. Materials should not be proscribed or removed because of a partisan or doctrinal disapproval. 3, libraries should challenge censorship in the fulfillment of their responsibility to provide information and enlightenment. Yeah, my jimmies are rustled personally, right? But also as a library professional, it is a core value that I am supposed to fight censorship. That is part of my job, to be an intellectual freedom fighter. I'm hoping we get some cool jackets. Number 4, libraries should cooperate with all persons and groups concerned with resisting abridgment of free expression and free access to ideas. So who would those persons be? Hi, how's it going? Thank you for helping me with the abridgment of our freedoms not happening. So I really appreciate this opportunity, because the fact that you're engaged in this process gives me hope, because it's a little bleak right now, folks. There are 95 of these, by the way. No, I'm just joking. Hope you all are comfortable. Number 5, a person's right to use a library should not be denied or abridged because of their origin, age, background, or views. And as we work at the national level to upgrade these to reflect society, we also need to talk about ability, right? Because intellectual freedom means access, and that means access to different formats, whether it's audio or visual. It means access digitally. It means access on my bookmobile, where I'm going to go to you where you organically exist in your community, because it's a barrier to try to get downtown Iowa City. I don't know how many of you have been there, but the parking's ridiculous, okay? All right, libraries which make exhibit spaces and meeting rooms available to the public they serve should make such facilities available on an equitable basis, regardless of the beliefs or affiliations of individuals or groups requesting their use. So we talk about banned books and shucks, they're very important. But intellectual freedom is a conversation we need to start being engaged in, because it's about the folks who look like the folks who are marginalized in the books. We know that Vinton lost 2 people at their public library this year due to anti-LGBTQIA+. What we do not talk about the consequences of those sentiments doing is actually taking 2 other members of that staff out, and they left the state entirely, right? So when we think about the work that needs to be done here, it includes a really good foundation here from Forrest Spalding, but we need to continue. And then lastly, all people, regardless of origin, age, background, or views, possess a right to privacy and confidentiality in their library use. I imagine I've annoyed some people when I'm on the reference desk. A parent will call and they'll say, "What does Janie have checked out?" And I'll say, I can't tell you that, because Janie has the right to privacy. Or, "What does my spouse have checked out?" And I'll say, you could chat with them about that, because I am not the steward of dispensing their information. I have to trust that they are trusting me to protect their privacy and their confidentiality. It doesn't win popularity contests, but it's very important. Libraries should advocate for, educate about, and protect people's privacy, safeguarding all library use data, including personal identifiable information. Do you know how a tough job this has become since the Amazon age? So I'm a child of the $10 paperback off of Amazon. I'm like, this is fantastic, and all of my colleagues are freaking out. They're like, the world's on fire, libraries are going to be destroyed. And I'm like, no, because the $10 paperback isn't really what this is about. It's about the fact that they're going to sell you 5 or 6 more, right? They're going to get your data and your algorithm, and they're going to actually tailor information and put it back to you and say, "You liked this. Did you know several other buyers bought a trampoline when they bought this book?" Is that just my algorithm? Did I just out myself weirdly here? Okay. We aren't tracking your data. And that's what's actually put a target on libraries' backs, because that data is very valuable. And we're pretty much the last place that doesn't collect it. So, where are we? This is the portion of the presentation where I crawl under this desk and cry violently. So, as your ILA president, it has been my responsibility to work with our 2 lobbyists. We have one that represents this side of the aisle, and we have one that represents that side of the aisle. And that has really helped us to try to negotiate bills that were thrown on the wall to see if they would stick at the early part of the cycle, right? Because we all know right now, if you listen very quietly, bills are being written this moment that they're going to produce in December and decide whether we want to move forward. So these are some of the greatest hits from 2022, 2023, but some of them included pitting city councils and public library boards against each other so that like the mayor or the city council would actually choose every book in a collection, which good luck because we put in tens of thousands back and forth in the Des Moines Public Library every month, as well as the Iowa City Public Library. So that feels like a big ask, right? Some of them tried to penalize with jail time up to a year for public librarians that might have titles on human health and reproduction. So some of these just died in the funnel, but it really took a lot of time and effort and massaging with our lobbyists, but also with folks like you who would reach out and say, this isn't what we want for our public libraries, or maybe this is what we want, right? So we know that the mandatory EDIA trainings that have really elevated our public education and have been award-winning are now being stripped of us. This is essentially the Florida playbook. I've been able to work with our member leadership in ILA off of the tuition that was paid by Florida and Texas and Missouri. They're all about a year ahead of us. And so we know that there's been like 3-year processes here with Florida where it was, we're gonna go into the school districts and we're gonna express some concerns and we're gonna erode trust and we're gonna castigate public librarians and teacher librarians and curriculum developers and school boards, and we're gonna say, we just don't trust you to do the work anymore. Our teachers and our school boards and our curriculum directors, we really needed to remind folks that they have a space at the table, that we have to keep inviting them in, even though they're not trusting themselves to apply their school district policies, their public library policies that are unique to every community, their reconsideration processes, their collection development policies, and then when you all request things, like I've been trusting you all to do that since the beginning, and you've all rocked it. So it should imply that it can't be done now is to not trust ourselves to do that good work, right? Which is very concerning. So at the national level, because I happen to sit on the ALA's executive board, we are working on our accreditation process, which is an accreditation of all the school libraries in the country, to try to fold in EDIA curriculum into that work, because we understand that it's not going to be coming to our field another way right now in some states. The other work was to kind of to remind folks that it's a lot easier to trust your teacher librarians when they have to have either an MLIS, a Master's in Library and Information Science, or at least a teaching degree. House File 672 now actually doesn't require either of them to be a media specialist for an entire school district. I'm actually already hearing rumors of like superintendent and principal spouses taking the role. There is still criteria. You have to have at least worked in a library. So if any of you were shelvers or pages at high school at one point, do I have a new career for you? Senate File 496 is one that we've been working on since the very beginning of the funnel. They actually wished to write an entire list of books they were going to ban. And so we worked with our lobbyists to say, could we maybe move that down a little bit? What do you think about obscenity? Because we know obscenity actually has legal code and a specific legal term. And it would have kind of closed the conversation because we're already following those rules in schools across the country, right, and across the state. And at the last minute, like a sonnet, that last couplet just turned dark on me and they changed obscenity to age appropriate, which is an incredibly vague term, right? Because I am 37 years old and I have a ridiculous Lego habit and a cat that I call like the office manager. Like what's age appropriate for me may not be age appropriate for the rest of you, right? I also know that as a practicing Christian, and I went to parochial school, I had sex ed when I was in kindergarten because of Immaculate Conception. The absence of something suggests the presence of something else. So what's age appropriate for me is a little different, right? And so unfortunately, we knew at that point this was going to be tricky because, not to get too political, but No Child Left Behind also didn't come with guidelines, and we see how that was vastly interpreted across the nation. So because I never went to a public school and I couldn't probably manage a locker combination, I went to all the school librarians across the state and I said, hey, y'all are on the ground. Can you help us figure out pieces of the bill that you need clarity on? So that if we can make this succeed, we understand logistically what we need from the Department of Ed. And so Our teacher librarians took that time. We surveyed them. We wrote a letter of inquiry, which felt fancy when I was writing it. And we sent it to Director Chase Aldiz, who was the Department of Ed's director at the time. He said, "Thank you for your proactive work. We'll use this for our guidelines." And we thought, hot dog. And then Director Aldiz was gone 2 weeks later, and we sent it again to Director Snow. And if you, again, listen very quietly, you can hear crickets. Nothing. But it's still good, folks, because I used to be a union secretary for Burlington before I joined the dark side with management, and I realized that at least we gave our teacher librarians receipts. We asked for this guidance well before the end of the last contract year. We still haven't received it. So the penalization that comes with Senate File 496 is a little bit more debatable at this point. We've painted our teacher librarians into a corner. They can't paint themselves back out, so we're trying to build tools to support them, because I think we're going to lose a lot of them this year. And then House File 718 is important. Neither West Des Moines or Des Moines has a levy, but it's important for you all to know, remember we have more public libraries per capita than any other state in the union. A lot of them rely on levy dollars. So Iowa City, it's 17% of their budget. Burlington Public Library, it's 25% of their budget. What essentially happened was this. 97 communities in the state said, we want a little extra tax to build our libraries. We have to put it to petition first because it can't get on the ballot without that. So it had to successfully petition. And then it had to go to ballot, and then it had to pass. And 97 communities around the state have done this. With the tax bill, those dollars will still actually be pulled. They'll still be taxed, but they no longer can be officially allocated to the libraries that they were built for. So if essentially a tax was built on the cachet and love of libraries in 97 communities, and now those directors have to go and get weird. And this is what I meant about getting weird. The city manager didn't say he wanted to not use those dollars, or she did not want to use those dollars for the public library. The city councils didn't say, we're going to take that money, we're all going to go to Vegas. But they legally cannot allocate those dollars anymore to libraries because it would be tying the hands of future city councils, which is against the law. So essentially, a state mandate has now made it very weird for us locally to conduct the work of libraries in 97 communities. The only levies that actually survived were airport levies. For example, the Grout Museum has a levy. 50% of its budget was gone overnight. How many of you were aware of this? Yeah. Right, a lot's going on. And so the banned books are very important to me, but I can't even buy banned books if my library closes. And so I'm just coming in here to bring heaps of joy. And then lastly, the governor's reorg bill lost us a lot of state oversight. So federally, IMLS, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, pays money from federal taxes down to all the states. So when I was the chair of the Commission of Libraries, it was my job to watch how those dollars were allocated across the state through the state library. So the fact that you can get a library card at nearly 500 other libraries and check out from there, the fact that you could check out the Iowa City Public Library, nice little plug there, and then return the material back to West Des Moines or Des Moines Public Library, wherever you happen to be, and they'll ship it back for free, are all part of statewide programs through the IMLS dollars. At least twice when I was chair, I had to go in and report to the committee hearings that they weren't giving us matching dollars. It's a $1 match, and we almost lost that for our entire state. So it's really important to have folks who are in the fray, who are taking attention to these things, to come in and say, if you could just maybe give them the money so they'll give us more money, that would be very helpful. Otherwise, we dismantle an entire service statewide. So now the reorg bill has moved the Department of Administrative Services over the state library, which means that any teacher librarians or academic librarians that were being supported by the Department of Education now have a further sever from the state library and the work we do. So Department of Administrative Services. So they're responsible for making sure the elevators at the Capitol work. And also now librarianship across the state. Totally matches. And then watching the budget, just because I'm a little interested in this right now, $120,000 had been reallocated out of the state library, and somebody raised their hand and said, what's this about? And it just quietly went back into the state library. So this reorg bill is already affecting us there. So I promise this is going to get better, I promise. But it's because you all are interested and engaged in the process. And then lastly, our current president for the National Library Association, so the ALA, just joyfully when she won the election about a year and a half ago said, I can't believe ALA elected a Marxist lesbian. And that has dismantled state libraries across the state, because intellectual freedom is books, folks, but it's also the use of meeting rooms, and it's also political ideation and the freedom to understand that we're a pluralistic society and that we're not all going to have the same worldview, right? And so it wasn't, hey, we are condemning the remarks of this president. It was, you need to eradicate yourself from the National Association entirely. And I was trying to be very gentle and turn the other cheek and make and not like loudly point out that we're a professional association and the state government doesn't really get to tell us what to do. Because free people read freely and free people associate freely. All right, I'm gonna get off my apple crate. Okay, so that's where we're at. And I will tell you this, because I've been watching Florida and I've been watching Missouri, it's gonna get worse next year. In fact, when Missouri fought back with the Missouri's ACLU, they threatened to defund all libraries in the state of Missouri last year. I'm like, if I feel like I ever want to feel sorry for myself, the Missouri Library Association President Otto is like, nah, hold my beer. I'm like, fine. But where are we? We're also still a library that has thousands of books go out of your libraries every single day. We're a library that will help you find a new recipe, and I offer taste testing services. Usually people don't take me up on this. We help you find housing, we help you find jobs. When Iowa Work Centers started to dismantle across the state, we put the software on our computers, and with no training and fewer resources, we helped folks find jobs. One of my favorite memories was when Maytag closed, and I had welders and engineers coming in who had never used an email address in their entire life, and I helped them find jobs. My team helped them find jobs, and they'd pop back in later, weeks later, and say, how's it going, Sammy? I'm like, good. And they're like, how can I help you? And they're like, I just want you to know I found the job. And I'm like, oh, are we filling out like benefits paperwork? And they're like, nope, I just want you to know I found the job. That's still happening every single day. Wow. I go in at like 7 o'clock in the morning at the Iowa City Public Library, which is 2 floors, before all the lights come on, and I think about everything that's going to happen in that building today. And it's because of you, right? I'm just sort of sitting around, waiting, and then you all come in and you decide you're going to learn a new language, or you're going to travel somewhere, or you're going to build a model airplane. You all do so many amazing things. And that's still happening around the state every single day. Folks are finding themselves in books every single day, because you're fighting to make sure that that representation stays. So I really appreciate that. But I do think it's important to impress upon you that things are going on in libraries beyond books, because the iWorks thing after the recession has not course corrected itself. The Iowa DOT put kiosks in public libraries across the state, and while they weren't perfect, they were absolutely wonderful, especially around election time and for those of us who have new students come in a couple times a year. We've lost those now too. We were not informed well ahead of time that we were going to lose those services. We were happy to support those services with no extra resources or staffing. But I am a little concerned about the fact that we've now lost those DOT kiosks for your ID and your driver's license in a heavily rural community that relies on driving to eat, to work, but also this feels a little close to voter suppression. If I need an ID and now I can't go find one, or it's incredibly cumbersome for me to do so, right? And I'll remind you that as local taxpayers, the extra electricity, the extra space, the extra staffing for both of those things, we all carried that together, right? And now it's gone. If we're going to carry it, it would be really nice if we at least had a say. Oh, this is the 10-minute warning. So where are we now? We've got this letter of inquiry going out. We're writing statements. We used to have a lobby day in Des Moines. It's March 6th. You're all invited. It's in the state law library. We're the only ones who get to do it. Ooh, you should come. I'll have snacks. But we're also turning this into an every day is lobby day, because there's just too many things going on. And we have to impress upon folks that the continuation of libraries and learning and literacy in this state are actually in your hands. So like during the legislative session, I'm like, let's do this, vive la resistance, and I've got my fist in the air, right? Can everybody just kind of hold up their fist if they're ready to be an intellectual freedom fighter? Nice. Now open that fist. Take a breath. Look how much you've got in there. Look at all you got. Look at all that efficacy and power that you all have in there. I'm counting on you. Isn't it nice to unclench and just think about the power you have? I like it. Feels good. We are co-sign letters. The Iowa City UNESCO City of Literature has a fairly stern letter to the governor's office. They're looking for signers, churches, public libraries, everybody who wants to just be on historical record for saying that this is wrong. And then Annie's Foundation is going to be rocking a really cool event here in Des Moines. Lorna, when is that?
Saturday at the Old Franklin Junior High School.
And we just completed a memorandum of agreement with them. They're going to start anonymously taking data from schools. What percentage was restricted? What percentage was removed? What criteria did you use? So that we will have talking points with the committee hearings next year to say this bill was supposed to increase transparency and oversight and it diminished it. And this is the impact on school libraries and tax-funded resources. Because I'm certainly going to be interested in knowing where those physical books go if they're removed. Right? So then let's get weird. I'm really hoping I can get all of you to commit to one person you talk to about this. Maybe you won't go on as long-windedly as I have, but just sort of letting them know what's happening is important. Building community is important. Y'all are in my community now. We lifted our fists together. That's very intimate. And then we opened them. That's even more intimate. And then we have to get weird. We have to remind folks that we know our power and we know our patrons because we are patrons and we know the stakeholders and we're going to hold them accountable because these are our libraries and they represent us. And if our libraries are going to continue to represent us, we have to have a voice at the table. But that also means thanking people for listening in advance. Every time I get a letter calling me a groomer, I thank the folks for the letter. And my executive board like, what is that about? And I'm like, do you realize that they gave a couple free minutes of their time today to talk about libraries? And we may be diametrically opposed to each other, but they're giving time and attention to something I love. I'm going to thank them for that. But then make advocacy pretty easy, right? So mentor somebody. I'm always looking for mentors. I can't tell you how much I've learned about the legislative process in the last year and a half, just like I can't believe how much I've learned about banned books since that fire in Orange City. So just know that I'm here. I've got some cards if we can stay up to date with each other, because if you're hearing something, I'd love to know, and I might be able to connect people, or you may be able to connect me. And I think that that's important as we continue to build community. And then this is one of my favorite quotes. And whatever your labors and aspirations in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace in your soul. With all its sham, treachery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world, right? Strive to be happy. So I just invite you all, after I've rained on your parades for 40 straight minutes, now try to be happy. And then I'll leave this up as we talk. These are the ways you can help. Thank you all so much for your time.
Questions?
I'd like to ask about specialized libraries. For instance, there is a Jewish library here. We have a library in our church, and I work with the Pride Center and the LGBTQIA library that we have at the Mickle Center here. And we are associated with Iowa City's library and archives there. We've traded books and gotten books back and forth. So where does that stand with all this you're saying? What does that include us or not include us?
I'm going to put a little pressure on your shoulders. You're our last bastion. Our nonprofits are specialized in private libraries. You're the last line. So there's a private bookmobile in my town, and sometimes it's like the Jets and the Sharks, and I'm like, do you know how much I love them? There's never too much space or too many libraries, right? But also, there might be a day that they make me take titles off my bookmobile. Sorry. And I'm going to count on Antelope to do it for us. I'm going to count on you to do it for us, because I have no idea where else these kids are getting these books. You know what I mean? And we can pretend that in the age of the internet they can get these books. I'm a child of the internet. That's not how I got my books. I got them from my cousin sneaking books out of the school library for me, and I got them from open libraries, and I got them from special libraries, and I'm sorry. Yeah, but a good question. Did that honor your question?
It did, but I just want to make two more comments real quickly.
Sure.
One is that a local actual bookstore gave us huge numbers of K through 12 LGBT books. And they also put cards with them from the public supporting gay and lesbian kids. And I thought that was fantastic. And I guess I've forgotten the other one.
I'm going to give you my card because you're building communities already, and that's so powerful. If I can be useful, I hope you'll let me be. Yeah.
We have about 5 minutes.
I'm afraid I don't quite follow. You're referred to as a groomer. We need a mic.
Oh,
Sorry.
oh, being referred to as a groomer?
Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, what has put the? I'm going to let you ask your question.
Okay,
Nancy,
well,
sorry.
what, does that mean you groom vulnerable kids to have bad ideas? Is that what groomers refers to there?
This is why I think you have to thank people for conversations and then almost golden retriever through it, like almost take the question seriously, because arguments and discourse can't happen if we're speaking each other's lines. But the lines that are being spoken for the librarians right now is that we have an agenda and that we're pontificating that onto other people. I'm like, I definitely do have an agenda. It's intellectual freedom. You know, I'm not gonna hide that, but I do think it's partly that. And it's like, again, it's like leaning in. So the whole Immaculate Conception thing was when I was having dinner with my folks, and they're like, Sammy, you didn't have sex ed. I'm like, I certainly did. And then, you know, I wasn't trying to mic drop them. I was just trying to give them another context. So one of my favorites is that I've read about straight characters and right-handed characters my entire life. In fact, I would say most of the written canon has a lot on both of those types of people. I am neither. So I must not have tripped on the right book that would have made me straight or right-handed. But apparently you can trip on a book that makes you gay. Yeah. And affirmation and representation is being conflated with promotion. Good question. Oh.
You seem to intimate that there are some funds that are kind of being misappropriated. Do you work with our state auditor and call things to his attention?
Rob, yeah, Rob, right? Yeah.
Rob Sand, he's a member here.
His hands seem to be increasingly tightened,
Oh, yes.
but you're absolutely right. And I'm being as loud as I feel like I can be about this, because I really do like being a public employee. It's hard some days to ring the bell, but I also don't want to be a public employee for libraries if libraries cease to be what they are today. So it's like we can have death by 1,000 cuts, or we can ring the bell and see what happens. Good question. Thank you. Yeah, he's a member here.
Yeah.
He's never told me about the Plymouth Library. No.
Well, with Planned Parenthood not having their books anymore, and I know, Sue, we tried to donate books to the Des Moines Public Library, but they won't take them.
Oh.
Okay? So therein lies a problem from my standpoint. Now, go away, Diana. I'm not finished.
I can't make eye contact anymore.
Anyhow, what I wanted to say was, do most of the libraries in the state accept books from private? Because, you know, we buy books all the time. I'd hate to see how much money we spend on books that we could donate, because we can't give them to Planned Parenthood
I would
anymore.
love to regale you with the complexities of donating materials to a public institution. We are currently facing where folks are bringing us flat earth materials and insisting we put it in their collection. We're having folks who are bringing us old, moldy high school yearbooks. And so unfortunately, I think that we have to do like an either or policy, which makes us look like monsters, because we would have to have staff just dedicated to that for a town of the size of Iowa City. But there are a lot of bookstores, so like in libraries, so like Burlington Public has one, so does Iowa City, where you can take your donations in reasonable volumes, pun intended, and they will sell them, or they will put them in the collection if their collection development staff say they meet the criteria. That's an excellent question. Yeah. Yeah.
One more question.
Okay.
Hi,
And then I'll
first,
be right
thank you so much for coming, and your work is inspiring, and I am very grateful. I'm Margaret Young, and I'm running for school board in Urbandale for this reason, because I want our kids to have a safe place.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
One thing I've given a lot of thought to is on the school board, we have to uphold the laws of the state. Do you have any advice on how to protect our librarians, our teachers, and meet the needs of all of our students?
That's a great question. So I feel like we need to know our history. We need to go back into like those school board reports, right? And meeting notes and say, how did we figure this out for like the last 75 years? Like the people making these laws had Brave New World in the classroom and they somehow made it out okay. So I think it's knowing our history because this path has been walked before. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. But then the second piece of it is really leaning into some of those brave conversations, right? So like our teacher librarians will not be able to report certain things, but there are avenues and outlets where they might be able to, or there might be engaged parents that might be able to. So I really do think it's becoming a little bit more agile with our community and understanding that when civic employees and public employees have had their hands tied, it really is going to require the community to come in and say, hello, right? And then I also think it's being very transparent. This law was meant to bring more oversight and transparency. I really want to know what percentage of the books in the Urbandale Public Library will be removed versus restricted. I want to know the percentage of the entire collection because it's a very sexy quote to go back and say, did you know that 75% of collections in the state of reporting school libraries have now been restricted to students? Was this the intended outcome of this legislation? And then they can answer that, you know? And it's not, again, to like drop a mic. It's simply to suggest that maybe if we leaned into school boards and curriculum developers and teacher librarians, instead of castigating them and casting them as groomers, we could have helped this bill succeed. And I really still want it to succeed, but success might be the grace and understanding that it's falling flat on its face right now and it needs to be a rewrite, right? We're giving us the guidance that we sought in May. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to reflect the values of our people and the work that's been done by our representatives, but it's not been work. It's almost been like rubbing a genie's lamp and hoping that everything goes okay. You know what I mean? Yeah. Boy, that sounded really, really judgy. I'm sorry. I think I'm going to have to go to the inspiration room and cool off.
Yeah, there you go. Let's give her a big hand. Thank you so much, Sam.